Oh,
Okay. These have dried overnight. It gives your toolbox a chance to set up. The weld gets a chance to dry out on them. You'll have a little bit of trouble getting your bottoms to stick unless you let them dry a little bit now. I'm going to take them over on the finisher and just lightly sand this area, take the glaze off of here, smooth out my arch cover, generally dress them up so the bottom will fit better. We've taken a set of leather soles and cased them. They're a little bit damp on the outside. By casing, you will take and sand the flesh off, rough it up, throw them in the water, soak them up, and then take them out. I find a plastic bag works very, very well. And throw them in a plastic bag and, let them dry for about 12 hours. And they'll just get moldable. Very nice and flexible. Then when they're dry, they set up hard. Also, it takes the first shrink out of them. You've seen so many soles come in, or maybe even bought a pair of boots where you've wore them, got them wet, and the sole shrunk up and pulled loose. You're doing a lot of that. You're taking a lot of that shrink out when you do this. The wooden pegs have a tendency to stick a little better. It just makes them nice and soft and flexible. You want them dry enough so that they'll stick. There's a little bit of dampness here, but they'll be fine. So I'll finish the bottom here and we'll put the soles on. Just basically roughed them up good, give something to stick to. I usually put 2 coats of cement on. A primer coat, I let it dry and put the extra tack coat on that I'm going to stick with. Leather being as porous as it is, it has a tendency to absorb quite a bit.
also that when you're doing this, you'll find that hot glue will fill up your sandpaper pretty bad, and you can just hit it with a piece of gum rubber soling and that work that paper clean again.
I usually lay them on a open magazine. In the repair side, you've got ink, you've got other people working there maybe, you don't know what everything is, so I always open a magazine and lay them down on it. Especially light colored boots, because once you set them down in a puddle of brown or black ink, you're done for. So open a magazine and lay them in. It's just an extra precaution. Even if you're by yourself, you may not remember what you did last, or you came along in a hurry and you set them down.
Let's take a look at the bottom of that. Run past us here. Okay.
And I do the same with the soles. I give them a thin coat, first coat. We can let this dry for a few minutes and put the second coat on, and we'll be assembling them then. I use a brass tack around the heel again, about a 6/8 brass extra iron clinching nail, that's what they're called, around the heel where I know the heel plate is, and then I peg the shank area. That'll be our next thing once we get the bottom on. I do soften the soles up quite a bit before I put them on because they are very stiff, and casing them helps. If they dry out a little bit too fast on you, take and spray a little water on the finished side and it'll soften up. We put our second set of glue on, second coating of glue on, so they're ready to go. I place them at the toe first and then bring them back to the heel. And I've made up a strap that doesn't quite reach the floor. This helps me shape the arch. I lay it right across the arch of the foot and then just put one of mine in the bottom and step on it. Years ago they made a shoe repair jack called the Grizzly Jack that had this incorporated right in it. Take it over on the 5-in-1, run it through. For those of you not in the repair trade, it's called a 5-in-1. It has a welt roller here to press your welt and your sole together here. It has a skiver here, a trimmer here, and a bend cutter. And it has a strap cutting attachment that I don't have in here anymore, that it was just a gauge you would slide up and down for what width of strapping you wanted to cut. You place the welt press on your welt, turn it around. They make what's called a lining pliers or a welt pliers. Looks like this, that you can go in and squeeze your welt together this way with if you want, if you're into putting them together by hand.
You can also get those at a stained glass shop too. It's a pliers that's real similar to that if you can't find one from your finder.
Now if you want a guideline to go on for trimming around the heel and so forth, you can take and run a pencil on a great deal like you were tracing his foot and run it around, and when you come on this side you're going to blend the line into the welt. This will give you a line to shoot for. I try and leave considerable amount here, a good 1/4 of an inch, because as the man wears this boot, he's going to wear into his counter cover if this is undercut too much. The boot factories today do this on a regular basis, and that's why we in the repair industry see so many counters wore off. Simply the fact they leave no heel rand here anymore. It's all ground off. So we'll trim it here. With the last in it, you're not going to be able to get into the instep as close as you're accustomed to doing in the repair side because the last is holding the boot in shape. So be careful so you don't scallop the inside of your boot here in this area when you do it. Okay, I'll let you look down the top of that and get some idea how much I left. So here we'll go over and put our nails around the heel, seat area. Again, I use about a 6/8 brass extra iron clinching nail around the heel. I nail in approximately a 1/2 inch from the edge, because you are going to trim some of that off. You're going to undercut it, you're going to flare it a little bit with the heel, so you're going to want to give yourself some room so you don't grind into the nails. Done with this, I take a nail set and I countersink these just a little bit because you're going to do some shaping with this leather bottom, and it helps not to have the nail in the way. Also does you no good to grind the head of this nail off because you have got no way to hold the sole on them. So I countersink them 1/8 of an inch or so, 1/16 of an inch.
You also want to remember not to go past your heel plate.
Right. Again, it's something you're going to get familiar with, where the heel plate stops. I gauge it on the side seam I put in here. I know that it runs up approximately a 1/2 inch ahead of the side seam. I start my wooden pegs about a 1/2 inch ahead of where the welt is going to end on a half welted boot. Again, with a full welted boot, you're putting a rubber sole on, so you're going to sew it all the way back anyway. Well, my welt is ending right about here, so I'll start my pegs in right about here.
Let me get a shot of your heel nail placement here. Okay.
Now you can use that jack over there that we inseamed on. That works fine. Again, this is a plate of beeswax and a pegging awl. You can buy these from your local shoe finder again. I run a set of holes first. And these are just standard shoe pegs. I try and get 6/8 in lengths when I can. 5/8 has to do sometimes. 6/8 isn't that easy to find all the time. You don't get a chance to gently tap a wooden peg in. Start it and hit it, because you're going to have to drive it in right the first time where they bend, and then there's no straightening them out.
As far as the depth, you'll get accustomed to just barely getting to the last with your pegging awl. I have a tendency to put them in a little deep sometimes, have a hard time getting the last out.
Okay, when we peg, I put 3 rows of pegging in, and I run my pegs like this, just like I'm running through my fingers here, so that they interlock on each other as they pass through the sole, like this. I'll run a row of pegs at this angle, I'll run a row of pegs at this angle. So it's something to keep in mind.
Can we see your first row there?
Oh, I suppose. Okay, now I'm going to take and I'm going to run a row here, in between them, and then I'm going to come over on the other side and do the same thing, like this. The wax lubricates the hole, makes the pegs go in a little easier. There are boot makers that take a very thin piece of crepe and put on the bottom part of their pegging awl, and it gives a little spring, bounces back out. I use my hand. I don't set it quite down as far, and I just let my hand bounce it back out. If you don't keep it coated, you're going to drive it in one of these times, and you're going to have to pull very, very hard to get it back out. This is again an area where many of us boot makers vary. Some like to run brass nails all the way up. Some like to peg them. Some even like to full weld every boot they make. Personal taste. Again, there's the second row. Now we'll move on to the third. I will say one thing for wooden pegs: they don't tear up your socks nearly as bad, but you do end up sanding them out. I have as much trouble with wooden pegs as I ever had with tacks.
Some of you people that have trouble gauging things, you can use a stitch marker again for your spacing. I usually take and just mark it with my thumbnail so I get a straight line.
Now I work them in good and tight. And there's one side. Do exactly the same thing on the other side. You can go ahead and trim the arch area if you want to get a better idea where to put your pegs. I pretty much just sight down it, drawing it with my other row of nails, because your instep area here is going to narrow. By the time you take your trimmer and trim in here, you're going to narrow up probably this much. So you know, it's something that you have to get used to, but I follow this row of nails and find it pretty easy to get along with. If you bust one off like that, just pound another hole. It'll all fit. There's no way to pull out a busted peg. Also, as this leather dries, it's going to dry around your peg and tighten up some. Putting the second row in now. Once you get accustomed to working on a boot with a last in it, you find it very uncomfortable to work on just a conventional shoe repair jack, because there's no form that you're working with. A lot of times I will take and relast a boot for a fella, take one of my lasts and stick in it, soak his boot up, and it's a good way for you to straighten the counter out. On a pair of boots that has come in with the counter all sagged over, you can take and use your lasts for that. The more you get into boot making, the more you'll discover they go hand in hand. Once you get done here, we're going to shape the bottom a little bit. You also want to take and work your pegs in a little bit. Don't be afraid to beat on them a little bit to set them good. Go. From here we'll move into the trimming and shaping of the bottom, and then we'll stitch the soles on. I've taken and sanded one of these for you, and I've left one plain so we can give you some idea what we've done. If we take and show you down on the toe, you see that you do trim some of the welt off. Shape your boot to what you want it to look like when you're done. I mean, if you want a fairly pointed toe, you're going to trim off more welt in this area. Same with here. It has a lot to do with the toe character that you're trying to put in the boot. If you go to a very, very pointed toe, just square it off a little bit. It looks a little nicer. I've taken and I've scalloped out the arch area and sanded it more concave. That's why I don't worry too much about that arch cover, because I grind quite a bit of the concave into the sole itself. I flattened the heel area out to give me a nice flat plane to work on in comparison to this one here. And I've trimmed up the heel ridge a little bit, the heel rand a little bit more. Give you some idea of the difference here. Basically made it round. So we'll go ahead and do this one, and we're ready to stitch the soles on. now got them ready to sew the soles on, so that'll be our next step. When you full welt a boot, it's something we should cover now. When you full welt a boot, run the welt back to here. If you haven't left the insole wide enough when you put the insole on, you're going to run into trouble sewing the welt in here. Okay? That's partially why you're leaving it wider. Don't be afraid to pull the last at this point and sew your soles and then put your last back in. Because you just will not be able to get down in this area here because there's too much overhang. If you don't leave your insole wide enough at this point. It's also why a half welted boot fits so much different than a full welted boot, because you've got more wrap this way around their instep. That's why some people find this particular construction of boot so comfortable. When you make a full welted boot, this side is going to be straighter down here. You're going to have more of a gap in here, more of a gap inside the boot instead of curving it around. So if you do, and you get up to your stitcher and you just can't get in here, pull the last out. Go ahead and sew your sole and put the last back in. We'll be covering pulling the last here pretty quick, so if you are doing it and you want to run ahead to that stage, it's coming up here real shortly. From here we're going to sew the sole on, and then we're going to build your bases, put your heels on and shape them. Then we pull the last. Then I pull the last then when I go to tree out my tops, shape my tops. So we'll stitch the soles on now. We're ready to sew them on. You can take a pin and mark where your welt ends if you want. I just take my fingernail and mark it. I generally spray a little water on the surface here to make the channel knife easier to cut. Most of your K-stitchers have a channel knife on the upper presser foot that will lay you, cut your sole and let you lay the thread in. You don't want to do that on a rubber sole, but I do channel a leather sole. If you're working with softer leathers, be careful that you don't mar it on the side of your stitcher, because there are things here that you just don't normally pay attention to when you're repairing shoes. You've got the form inside, so nothing gives. There's no way to push your top out of the way. I've got a roller assembly here that I roll my seam back flat again. It's raised up a little bit now. Closes it back up again. You can do the same thing, take it on your last and just pound it flat if you want. It's just a little faster. From here we're going to go into building the bases up and putting the heels on. We're ready to build the bases. I've cut a stack of leather for building our bases. I use pretty good leather when I make my bases. That way your bases aren't going to shrink and swell, shift on the man. If the man is fairly heavy set, he's going to have a tendency to squish the base out anyway, so I use pretty firm leather. On the first rand that I cut, I split them like this. This allows for it to fit what remaining curve you have a little easier. So I just run it cut in it about that far. As for placing your base, how long do you make your base? How long of a heel do you put on them? We generally run up to where your arch of your last starts to curve. You have generally a flat area, and it'll start to break right about here. And that's usually where we try and put a heel. So many times the bigger the boot, say a size 12 or something, they put the same size base on they do a size 8, and it's too short. The man's arch breaks down, he breaks the outside of it down, loses his support. So you're going to find, as the boot grows, your base is also going to grow longer as well. Another rule of thumb that you can come up with is it almost inevitably comes up to be approximately a ½ inch ahead of this side seam. However, this isn't true if you do a lot of trimming on our patterns. But this is a rule of thumb that you can use, that you're going to be about in this area here. I will take one of my layers and just visually make a straight line across on it. I've pre-roughed these, taking the glaze off the surface on them, so they're ready to cement. And I try and keep my heels the same length. I find that very critical. I don't want one set in here farther than the other, because it's going to affect how the boot feels. Okay, just like this. We'll glue this first layer. I'm going to go ahead and build all these by hand for you. We were going to take and auto-sole one on, but since most of you may not have the bigger auto-soler, we won't do that. We'll do her by hand. Also, if you were going to use the auto-soler to build up your base, you would pull the last now and build it up. So we'll glue our first layers here. These I don't put 2 coats on because you're holding it together with nails. So it's going to stay. This doesn't matter. You can put the glazed side down, glazed side up, whichever way you want to. This is the first layer. This is the layer again I told you I split like this. I use wood. They're called wire wood heel attaching nails. They're 7/8 of an inch long. They have a flat head on them. This is what I use to build up the base with when I do it this way. You can do it that way, or you can buy pre-built bases. These may seem, they're $50, $60 a dozen, something like that, and they may seem terribly expensive to you, but when you stop and think of how much leather you're going to be using to build them by hand, that isn't too bad. And they're pre-shrunk. That's something else that I should mention I try to do when I remember to do it, is I try and cut up my leather I'm going to be using for them, and I pre-shrink them, put them in the water, and then let them dry out, get good and hard. It saves, again, when that person goes out and gets his boot wet, saves the embarrassment of him coming back to you and saying, look at what happened, and his whole base is shifted over, or something like that. About ready to go here. First coat dries relatively quick, so we don't have to wait too long. I try and angle the front of my base a little bit. I don't do quite as severe a job as Paul Bond. I don't want something sitting in like this, but I do put a little bit of a slope to the front of the base. I've gone as far as setting a heel in as far as a person wants to accommodate a certain stirrup that they're riding. They've brought in the stirrup and said, I'd like my heel placed here when you build my boots. Fine. It doesn't take any more work to do that. You'll generally find people that do a lot of horseback riding like a little bit more of a scallop in here. So I will build this center up and give them more of a scallop in here. It seems to hook the stirrup better in this area here. So that's something you might want to be aware of if you're in an area with a lot of working ranchers. Again, this is the one with the cut in it. I try and loosen it up again. I take and I run it through my welt press. That has a tendency to draw your heel ran down flat again. I'll show you here. You've compressed it with the strap, and you've rounded it to the point where it's not setting flat anymore. And if you do this, it has a tendency to flatten this area back out again, which is what you want. Okay. Now we'll trim the excess off here. This you can trim with a lip knife if you want to. You don't have to have all the equipment. You can trim this down with a lip knife. I place my first row of nails. Remember, as you grow height-wise on your base, and if you're going to put a fairly undershot heel on it, you're going to have to start moving your nails in as you put layers on. Otherwise, you're going to run into your nails. Start out wide, and you'll start placing your nails in farther. take this on the finisher now and take quite a bit of the rise out of the middle, out of this area here, before we put our next layer on. Put your nails in at the same time, it doesn't matter, as long as you know where you're nailing. I showed you the trimming first because once you trim the excess off, it's a lot easier for someone who's starting to get the nails in the right place. Well, that's two. Sometimes, just move it over a little. You're probably hitting a nail underneath, so just move your nail over a little bit. These are glue-coated nails. The glue heats up as you drive them in, and they stick pretty good. If you have an auto solar, I would generally take and put this first rand layer on, and then shape the base I bought to this layer. I would take and grind this layer until this base sets properly. Overset it a little bit. Saves you a little time. These are a little faster. And then take your big auto solar and drive your half dozen nails into this. It will do in one operation what we're going to take about 4 operations to do. Okay.
Okay, let's see your nail layout on that.
Yeah, it's the same as yellow. Now I'm going to take and just take this center down here. So I'm working with more of a flat area. Yeah, I've just basically sanded her flatter. And I do this with each layer, so that as I work, I square the base up as I'm going. I get it flatter and flatter and flatter. Makes it a little easier when you come to putting the rubber heel on. So we just take another couple layers and do exactly the same thing. If you were to be building a very undershot heel, you can take and cut smaller layers and just start setting them in, as they've done on this here. Don't start doing that right away. It's not an easy thing to figure, and as you sand, you may end up with a hole in your base where the steps don't overlap properly. And that doesn't look very good. So cut them all big enough. You aren't going to be saving that much material to start with anyway. Cut them plenty big. Let that one dry. You can take a hair dryer or something if you want and speed up the process, blow on it. That helps. They have like sun lamp machines to where you can take your glued pieces and stick them in there, and that will speed up the process. These get ready to put together, we'll put the next layer on. We've got your last layer we're putting on. I have trimmed, leveled as I went. I've also trimmed the heel breast as I went, because once you get up here past 1 or 2 layers, you can't get in there. So trim them as you go. I put about an 8 or a 9/8 nail in the last layer. And 5, 6 of them are plenty. I'll show you the pattern here. Remember, keep in mind what size heel you're going to end up with. I may have to move that one nail. Just like so. A good way to do her is take a heel of approximately the size you want to end up with and set it on your base. That nail I've got to move. Here's a base. I took the other boot and went ahead and finished it for you. Give you some idea what we're shooting for. As you can see, there's considerable shaping going on here. This is the... I may move to the bigger heel. That's a little bit small for that boot. When I trim the... I'm going to have to get some 12s here, just a sec. When I trim the base, when I taper it, I leave the sides straight. Right here. This has to be straight. You'll notice I've got a considerable amount of taper here, but I've got a very wide heel here. You can build as tall as you want. You can taper as much as you want, as long as you leave these sides straight. As soon as you start tapering the sides like the factories do, you're losing lateral support this way. Give them a wide heel across here. I don't care if the heel's only this big. Give them a wide heel across here. We'll move on to a size 12. Yeah, there we go. I'll show you how much she's shrunk from what we started with. I do glue my heel caps on. I just feel that it's something that goes with the boot. I'm going to move this one nail in a little bit. On some of our repair work we don't. On some of the rattier boots we don't, but we do normally glue our heel caps on. So we've gone from this to this. Also, as you put your heel cap on, you're going to want to set it in a little bit like this so that you can follow the taper that you put on your base. When you build a base up, it's going to grow larger in the back than in the front, so it sets level on it. You're going to have to taper this base down. You're going to have to cut the front down, make more of a wedge out of it. I've come up with a way of doing it to where I've just taken and built me a platform to set the boot on, the same thickness of a Western boot. And I really...
Western boot heel.
Western boot heel, yes. And I set the boot on as I'm building it, this out of your way, so that it sets level. There's no gap this way in the back of the heel. There's no gap in the front. The boot isn't sitting like this high in the front to where it would have to rock over the edge of the heel. You want it setting solid, level. With that, we'll go ahead and trim up this other base and put the heels on them and go from there. another method here. When you get it roughed in, you lay your heel on, set it about where you want it, take a pencil and trace around it. You get a much better concept of where you want to grind. It's pretty easy to twist your base, get it crooked when you're grinding it. It's also at this time to where if the man wants a correction, put in his base, you would put a wedge in it or whatever. Now's the time you'd be doing it. You can take an offset of heel, grind it more off of this edge and leave it flared out more this way for a man who runs his boot to the outside or inside terribly. Just take more of a bite off here and leave it fuller over here. You can also take an angle to front. This is an exaggeration, but you could angle it like this and give him more support here, or you could angle it like this and give him more support on the inside. All things that you can do while you're building the base up. My heel.
I put mine bottom to bottom sometimes too if I'm checking. I'm not sure they're just exactly the same.
Yes, you do like this. Make sure you've got them symmetric all the way around. You'll also notice that we took none off of this. See here? You've still got this sticking out about a good strong eighth of an inch, maybe even a little stronger, beyond the farthest point of your heel counter. That gives them that protection against if they're sitting and driving a car like this, they aren't going to wear their heel cover off. It also is your spur ridge. Some people will call it a spur ridge. This is your heel rand, but you'll get fellas in, they'll say, I want you to leave me a bigger spur ridge. So you're going to exaggerate this even more, something for their spur to set on. Once you get your heel cap on, then we're just going to do some final rough trimming and pull the last. And tree the tops out. By that I mean shape the tops. Remember they've wrinkled and puckered considerably since we started this. As you get into this, if you haven't done any repair work before, what we're doing is basically what you'll be doing if you put a full sole on. with the exception of the fact that you would use this base over again. You'd take the base off and save it. Other than that, you would put the bottom on the same way. If it's a pair of boots you built, you'd probably want to put the last back in it so you could peg it. But other than that, we're just basically doing repair work. You want to end up with bases that look alike. Most of the time, granted, they would not see what you see, but you're going to want to be able to set them side by side and not have anybody notice any irregularity in them or anything. There we go. I'll go ahead and sand the heel caps and we'll give you a shot of the finished trimming when we're done before we tree them out, and then we'll go over and pull the lasts. There we go. I haven't used the nom keg on them, which is this sanding wheel up here. This is a super fine sanding wheel, because when I get to that stage of the game, I just take a mist and I spray on here and I use it then. It gives you a very super fine finish. So that I do at that particular time. You sanding your bases, you aren't going to want to grind into the tops, and by leaving this extra amount here, you're going to have a little bit of a cushion. You don't have to get in there quite as tight. So that will help you, protect you from getting into them. Just take your time with them. You've got no reason to be in a big hurry when you do this part of the finishing, and this is what the customer's going to see, so take your time at this point. From here we'll go over and pull the lasts out and tree the tops out and show you that.